Something that's ultra rare in Major League Baseball is a team playing a home game in another team's stadium. We've seen countless times where a game was held at a neutral site, such as international games or the Field of Dreams game, but I'm not referring to those. I'm talking about an established MLB stadium where a visitor was the home team. It doesn't happen often, but still does for one reason or another. In 2017, we saw not one, but two late season series be relocated due to hurricanes. The Houston Astros hosted the Texas Rangers at the Tampa Bay Rays Tropicana Field due to Hurricane Harvey. 2 weeks later, the Rays themselves hosted the New York Yankees at the New York Mets City Field due to Hurricane Irma. Hurricanes aside, just 4 years ago, the Mets shortstop Ahmed Rosario hit a walk-off home run at Yankee Stadium. It was the 2020 season, and a Mets home game against the Yankees got postponed. When the Mets traveled to Yankee Stadium later that season, it was just easier and safer to have the Mets be the home team rather than the two clubs and their staff travel to Citi Field. Ironically, from 1974 to 1975, the Yankees played all their home games at the Mets ballpark at the time, Shea Stadium, because the Yankees ballpark was undergoing lengthy renovations. While they had to play away from Yankee Stadium for 2 seasons, it wouldn't be the last time they had to be the home team somewhere else. For one day a quarter century ago, the Yankees had to once again call Shea Stadium their home. The story begins on April 10th, 1998, when the New York Yankees hosted the Oakland Athletics. What's significant about that game, you're wondering? Not only was it the first home game of the season for New York, it was the first home game of the 75th anniversary season of Yankee Stadium. The first game there occurred on April 18, 1923, where reportedly over 70,000 fans attended to watch the Yankees beat the Boston Red Sox 4-1. In perhaps the most storied venue in professional sports, all the Yankees and Athletics did was produce the highest scoring game in the stadium's history. New York won by a final score of 17-13, highlighted by a 5 RBI day from first baseman Tino Martinez. New York was scheduled to face the Athletics, Anaheim Angels, and Detroit Tigers on this homestand, with the series against the Tigers coming on the exact anniversary date. However, that game against Detroit and any ceremonial plans would never happen. On April 13th, just 5 days prior to the anniversary date, part of Yankee Stadium collapsed. Specifically, a 500-pound, 18-inch steel jolt fell from the upper deck onto the mezzanine area, right on the seats in a section along the left field line. One seat was completely destroyed, and a large 6-inch hole was left in the ground. By incredible fortune, this occurred at approximately 3 p.m., 4 hours prior to the game's start time, so there were no fans or staff in the area. The Angels strength and conditioning coach Bill Lasur was on the field at the moment and stated, "I heard a tremendous bang, saw a big puff of smoke and chunks of concrete coming down. I looked around and said, is there anyone else here who saw that? I realized I was talking to myself. There was no one else here." New York City Mayor Rudy Giuliani even commented on the incident, saying how someone would have been killed had this occurred during a game. Obviously, that night's game and all future ones were temporarily postponed. Giuliani stated that the city parks department, building department, and engineers were to make any inspections and any necessary repairs until it was safe to play there again. Luckily, it would not take long for the stadium to reopen, as the Yankees returned to play 11 days later on April 24th. While the stadium was being fixed, it opened up another predicament. The Yankees had 6 games scheduled that week at home that had to be made up. They couldn't just sit out a week and make up those games later in the season. It would be a scheduling nightmare and possibly against MLB rules. At the time, it was illegal for teams to go more than 20 straight days without a day off, and given the tight schedule teams are on, it would be impossible to simply postpone them all. The solution for the Tigers games was simple. Since the Yankees were supposed to fly to Detroit later that month, both teams simply swapped series. According to Yankees owner George Steinbrenner,
that means switching our series. That's relatively easy. In other words, we were going to play Detroit here this weekend. We should go and just take the games there and flip-flop those 3 games.
The first 2 games against Anaheim were postponed to later that season in August when the Angels returned to New York. Originally a 3-game series, the 2 teams ended up playing 5 games in 4 days. What about that 6th and final game, you're wondering? it was decided that the third game of that Yankees Angels series was to be played at Shea Stadium. If you're wondering why only one of the Yankees Angels games was played at Shea as opposed to all three, reporter Randy Kennedy stated, officials said they could not move tonight's game with the Angels to Shea because of the logistical difficulties of transferring the ticketing system and preparing the stadium. It just so happened that the Mets were also home hosting the Cubs, so it's not as if the stadium was vacant. What was supposed to be a full week of celebration at one of sports' most historic venues turned into one of the most unusual scenarios that's ever happened. There were going to be 2 games featuring 4 teams played at the same venue on the same day. It was the first time something like this happened at least that century, and to my limited knowledge, this was the only time it's ever happened. On April 15th, the Yankees team boarded the bus from Yankee Stadium and took the trip over to Shea Stadium for 12:05 p.m. start time. It was raining prior to first pitch, so neither team was able to take batting practice, leading to some players taking swings inside the hallway of the clubhouse. What was expected to be 30,000 fans in attendance on this Wednesday afternoon turned into a much larger crowd as over 40,000 fans showed up to this historic game. I'm sure you can imagine how crazy it was for the Shea staff to direct the fans to their assigned swap seats, as noted by announcer Jim Cott.
Welcome to Shea Stadium. That'll be a busy place today, that fan information booth.
Stadium manager Kevin McCarthy even said it was the most difficult part of the day.
What's been the most difficult part?
Helping the fans out with their Yankee tickets, because we don't have exact locations for them here. We're accommodating them as much as we can.
Compared to everything that occurred leading up to this day, the game itself wasn't out of the ordinary. New York pounced on Angels starter Ken Hill right out of the gate. 3 batters in, Paul O'Neill singled in Chuck Knobloch for the game's first run, and 2 batters later, Tino Martinez drove in O'Neill with a double to take an early 2-0 lead. The third inning saw the exact same outcome, as Martinez once again drove in O'Neill on a double to go up 3-0, and 1 inning after that, Paul O'Neill drove in Derek Jeter on an RBI triple to take a 5-0 lead in the 4th. Speaking of Derek Jeter, would you believe that this was his first game ever at Shea Stadium? In his career, Jeter played in 37 games at Shea, and interestingly, his initial trip there was not against the Mets. Staying on topic on players making their Shea debut, the same can be said about Jorge Posada, Bernie Williams, and Tino Martinez. Additionally, New York starting pitcher David Wells was also making his Shea Stadium debut, and he was lights out. He threw 8 innings, allowing 4 hits, 3 runs, walked 1, and struck out 8 batters. Funny enough, one of the runs Wells allowed came on a home run from the Angel shortstop Gary DiSarcina, which is unusual because DiSarcina only hit 28 home runs in his career across over 4,000 plate appearances. While DiSarcina's home run was the most unexpected, the most memorable one came from the Yankees' designated hitter Darryl Strawberry. For those unaware, Strawberry spent the first 8 seasons of his career as a Met from 1983 to 1990, and is perhaps the greatest slugger in their franchise's history. Not only does he hold the record for the most home runs hit as a New York Met, he holds the record for most home runs hit at Shea Stadium. His solo shot in the bottom of the 5th was his 127th and final homer he ever hit in the stadium's history. As he rounded the bases, the home run apple in center field, which rises every time a Mets player hits a home run, was activated for Strawberry, but only rose halfway since the Mets logo is present on the apple. I'm also 99% certain this has been the only time a Yankees player ever got a curtain call at a Mets home stadium. Heading back to the 9th inning, reliever Jeff Nelson induced the final 3 outs for the save, and the Yankees defeated the Angels 6-3. This game ended right at 3 p.m., and the Mets game that very night was scheduled for a 7:40 first pitch, so the grounds crew and other staff now had an enormous job to do. Of course, the workers had to clean the entire venue and prep the field again, but something I find funny is that they had American League team flags flying overhead, and they had to switch to the National League ones usually present. By pure luck, the broadcast of the Mets game that same day exists online, and by all accounts, there were 0 issues with the preparation.
And I asked Pete before the game if there was any trouble with the field getting it ready, and he said no, there was no problem. The field handled it well. It was just a matter they had to get it ready in time for the Mets to take batting practice.
which they did on time.
And for those wondering, the Mets won that night, defeating the Cubs by a final score of 2-1. Not a bad day for New York sports fans. 26 years ago, the New York Yankees played in one of the most unusual games in their near 125-year-long history. A home game away from home due to structural damage to their stadium. By coincidence of the Mets schedule, they were part of a unique feat. A venue hosting 2 games from both leagues in a single day, and both of the home New York teams won. It's the only time something like this has occurred in the 20th and 21st century, and it's possibly the last time we'll ever see it happen.